Hello and a very warm welcome indeed to Quadriga, coming to you from the heart of Berlin. And this week the focus is on the crisis in Kashmir, a territory claimed by both India and Pakistan, making it one of the world's most volatile flashpoints. And in the latest development, India's government has stripped Kashmir of its long-held autonomy, saying it's time to bring peace and prosperity to the region. But the Muslim majority is furious, claiming that India's ruling Hindu nationalist BJP party instead aims to change the demographics of Kashmir. Tensions are running high and there has been talk of war. So our question on Quadriga this week is Kashmir crisis, new era or power grab? And to discuss that question, I'm joined here in the studio by Christian Wagner, a senior fellow with the German Institute for International and Security Affairs, specialising on South Asia. He says a lasting solution to the Kashmir question will only be possible if there are no border changes in the region. Also with us is Deutsche Welle's Shahzeb Jillani of the DW Urdu desk, who believes that once the curfew is lifted, the situation in Kashmir can boil over and lead to violence. And a very warm welcome too to another of DW's regional experts, Isha Bathia from our Hindi desk. And Isha argues that the process of economic development in the region cannot take place without including the local people, and they are feeling very insecure about their future. Thank you all three for being here today. Wonderful. And I'd like to begin with you, Isha, and a fundamental question. Why is Kashmir so important to India?
There's a very famous saying, a poem actually. It says, if there's paradise on earth, it's here, it's here, it's here. And that was written in the 13th century. We're in the 21st century now, but the emotion still remains the same. So Kashmir, more than just a territory, is an emotion for both India and Pakistan. And since 1947, we haven't left it. It's an emotion in such a manner that if I talk about my generation, we've grown up watching...
This is absolutely essential to the Indian identity.
It's essential to both India and Pakistan. So I would say for my generation, we've grown up watching movies where we've celebrated war and we've taken a lot of pride in the fact that we've beaten Pakistan, and war for us is the equivalent of a cricket match, that you have to win it. You don't care that people are dying there. And now it's the same sentiment that you see after the Article 370 was revoked. If you look at the language on social media, if you look at the trends on Twitter, it's sad in a way that people of Kashmir were never asked what they wanted, but the rest of the country is really celebrating because it's so much important to their identity that finally we have it.
OK, Shahzeb, turning the question round, why is Kashmir so important to Pakistan?
Well, for Pakistan, it has been an unresolved issue from the time of partition, when both Pakistan and India were created in 1947. Pakistan has shaped its foreign policy around the issue of Kashmir. It has had, at least 2 direct wars with India and another military conflict in 1999 in Kargil. So Kashmir has been central to Pakistan's national security paradigm. It has prevented both India and Pakistan to become friends, to have normal relations. And for Pakistanis, it is an emotive issue because they genuinely believe that Kashmiris are being oppressed by the Indian army. For a long time, Pakistan was supporting the Kashmiris by arming them. But there's also this genuine belief that Kashmiris are Muslims, they identify with us. Given a choice, they will join Pakistan. And Pakistanis believe that that choice was always denied by India.
I wonder what Christian Wagner has to say about all this. I was talking to an Indian commentator here in Berlin this week, and she told me that things will never be the same after recent events, the events of the last 2 weeks or so. Is that an estimation you share of the gravity of the crisis at the moment?
Yes, I would say things have changed fundamentally. Also, I would argue that I see the changes more in the context of India's democratic system, because the decision of the Modi government to revoke the special status has far-reaching implications, not only for Kashmir, yes, but also on the debate in India on federalism, in the way how this change has been done. and with regard to the ongoing debate on secularism in India. From the international side, from the foreign policy side, India's position has not changed. So they still see Kashmir as a bilateral issue with Pakistan, but as we have seen over the last couple of years, the Indian government is not interested to go into any form of negotiation with Pakistan on any issue, and not on this issue especially.
Isha, you are nodding.
Yeah, I totally agree to him. We do not see that, although India has been saying that it's a bilateral issue and we have to talk to Pakistan and only then we can solve it. But after this, after revoking Article 370 and 35A, now there's not going to be any discussion, and that is very clear. And that belongs to this narrative that Narendra Modi gave even before he was elected in 2014, that he's there to bring about changes. The narrative was that nothing has happened in the last 70 years. Congress was there and never did anything. India is there where it was in 1947, and here comes the savior, here comes the man who's going to change everything. And that's a big change. He would, of course, take credit for it, that nobody else, none other government ever managed to do something as big as this. And they found out loopholes, they found out the legalities, and they did it, which nobody had thought about it. It came as a surprise for Pakistan.
It's interesting when you talk about that narrative. Mr. Modi came out and said this week, he said, we as a nation, as a family, have taken an historic decision. That's pretty telling language, talking about the nation as a family. It sounds there are real issues there about inclusive and exclusive. Shahzeb.
But, you know, the Indian opposition leaders have called it a historical blunder. As Christian was saying, there are serious concerns in India in the manner in which it is done. So, for example, let's kind of break it down. You know, what has been done? So one of the laws which has existed all these years gave protection to native population in Kashmir in terms of property rights and so on and so forth. That has been scrapped. Now, that's not unique to Kashmir. There are other Indian states where it exists, like Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Punjab. And that existed because there's a particular dynamics there, and the government wanted to protect that. That's gone now. And the biggest fear is that Hindu Pandits who had to leave Jammu, 2 decades ago, will now be resettled. And essentially, the biggest fear is that the majority will now turn into minority. And this is political and social engineering, and that Prime Minister Modi will not stop there. If he can get away with this one, he will then focus on other parts of India where there are secessionist tendencies. So for India internally, it's true. Isha is absolutely right that the majority is celebrating because Narendra Modi is popular, populist, nationalist. Yet there are worries among journalists, among opposition leaders, among civil rights leaders, that this could lead in the long run unraveling of India's secular, liberal, inclusive character.
A lot of nodding going on here, but before we're going to talk about the future, obviously, let's just go a little bit back in time. The Kashmir conflict has, of course, been raging for decades. Let's go back to the time when it started.
The mountainous region of Kashmir has long been home to Hindus when it began to be Islamized in the 13th century. That's something Hindu nationalists have never accepted. For them, Kashmir is the land of the Hindu goddess Saraswati. The conflict over Kashmir began in 1947 at the end of British colonial rule. India and Pakistan both claimed the region as their own, triggering their first war for control of Muslim-majority Kashmir. After the war ended in 1948, Kashmir was divided between India and Pakistan, though the line of control has never officially been recognized as the border. Pakistan has more or less openly supported Muslim separatists in Kashmir ever since. That's led to 3 more wars, numerous outbreaks of violence, and terror attacks, like the one on the Indian Parliament in Delhi in 2001, and the Mumbai attacks of 2008. The stakes are higher than ever now that both India and Pakistan are nuclear states. Has Kashmir lost its autonomy for good?
That is indeed the question, Shahzeb. Has Kashmir lost its autonomy forever now? Has it gone?
It seems that way, especially because if you look at the world reaction to this, hardly any major world capital has condemned it in clear terms. And Pakistan essentially was caught by surprise that the Prime Minister of India can actually go ahead and do this. I mean, we've known all along that it was part of the party manifesto. It was their desire for last 50 years, but that actually he will do it. And now that it is done, Pakistan is struggling to find out how it can react, because now India is saying this is our internal matter.
And the reaction has been described as subdued. What is going on below the surface, though?
In Pakistan? In Kashmir? Listen, I mean, there are secessionist tendencies in many other parts of the world, right? We know, for example, Catalonia in Spain, the Scottish want to be separate from UK, Quebec, Canada. When you do it without involving the population in question, there's always a fear that it'll backfire. For me, Kashmir right now is a dormant volcano. We don't know how angry Kashmiris are because there's a complete shutdown. No internet, no television, no media. There's curfew for the last 10 days. If and when the curfew is lifted, and it will have to be lifted, right, we will find out, how upset Kashmiris are, whether this leads to violence or whether Modi government will divide and rule. They will, they'll get some politicians on its side and take it from there. But I am fearful. I mean, I am concerned. The world doesn't appreciate it at the moment. But if this goes into violence and if Pakistan and India are back on the brink of a war and two nuclear-armed nations, then the world will have to take notice. And I hope it doesn't come down to it.
Meanwhile, Isha, India is being described as treating Kashmir as a colony, of being a fully fledged occupying force, of being the master of a prison. How do Indians respond to those kind of accusations?
By Indians, you mean the Indian masses?
Yes.
Or the Indian government?
Yeah.
The masses, as
Both,
I said,
indeed.
in the beginning, it's a huge emotion. People are celebrating everywhere other than Kashmir. And if I may just go back to the map that you'd shown. Now, we see this huge territory there. The left-hand side is Pakistan, the right-hand side, China has a little part. And internationally, when we talk about it, we think that the whole part is Kashmir, whereas there is a bifurcation there. You have Kashmir, you have Jammu, you have Ladakh. Ladakh being the smallest, which is going to be a union territory now, and there are only about 300,000 people living there. Jammu has about 6 million and Kashmir has 8 million, if I'm not wrong. So basically, Jammu and Kashmir, it forms the major chunk, and Ladakh is where most of the Buddhists are there. Jammu has the Hindu population, Kashmir has Muslim. So the whole conflict is about this area where the Muslim population resides. That is where there is this sentiment of we do not belong to India or we were not being asked. And if you're asking about what the government is talking about, if you see how this whole event is being covered right now, there are two very different narratives. The international media is showing that there are pellet attacks. The international media is showing that there are protests, there are people coming out in the streets. The Indian media is showing that people there are celebrating because the Indian media is going to Ladakh, the Indian media is going to Jammu and talking to people there. So obviously, both the things are happening. So we have to consider Jammu, Kashmir, Ladakh as a whole and then look at the picture.
And Christian Wagner, there are many Muslims now in Kashmir who are fearing that there will be an influx of Hindus changing the demographics of the region. Is that likely? Is that on the cards?
Yes, I think this is certainly part of the strategy of the government in the mid to long-term perspective to change the demographic scenario. Because with the abolition of the special status of Kashmir, it will become possible for people from other parts of India to go to Kashmir to buy land, also for companies to invest. So you will see, and this is also part of the strategy, there will be an investor summit of the Indian government on Kashmir in October. And of course, the government has also has provided a legislative assembly to the union territory of Jammu and Kashmir. So we may also see early elections, or we may see elections probably in the next year. And then it will be difficult for the Muslim parties so far whether they will participate or not. If they boycott the elections, then the majority of this new legislative assembly will be mostly Hindus from Hindu parties. And one should also not forget that BJP already had a strong position in this part of Kashmir. In the last assembly election, they had 23% of the votes. So I think in the long-term perspective, the idea is to fundamentally change the political constellations. One aspect is also that all the leaders of the major parties, of the existing parties in Kashmir, has been put under house arrest, which also shows
when you say fundamentally change, and when you talk about people being put under house arrest, that can't go on forevermore. There has to be a resolution to the situation. Has to be found somehow.
The resolution will be new elections. Resolutions will be this new institutional setup of a union territory, which much more limited competences compared to a state. The union territories are administered by the Home Ministry, so it shows that they will have much less space. Yes, and the political solution is to implement some form of democratic representation, which will be done with new elections, but the protests will go on, yes.
I don't think new elections will solve anything. In all likelihood, Kashmiri Muslim politicians will boycott it because they feel they have not been consulted in any of this. India has used its might to press ahead with this. And if they do boycott, which is most likely, as you said, the Prime Minister's party, Bharatiya Janata Party, will form a government, but it will be seen as a puppet government, not representing Kashmiri sentiments, and it will not solve anything. We've seen this before in Kashmir. Pro-India politicians like Mehbooba Mufti, like Umar Abdullah, who were brought into government, who formed governments, but they never really represented the will of the Kashmiri people. And now those politicians are siding with those who are deeply upset with India or are anti-India now.
And coming back to the whole issue, the whole toxic issue of demographics, I saw a quote from one elderly Kashmiri woman the other day. She said, "It's clear that Mr. Modi wants Kashmir, but not Kashmiri people." Is that pathos or is that close to reality?
That is the saddest part about Kashmir, that neither Pakistan nor India have really cared about the Kashmiri people. For the two governments, it's a territory that they have been fighting over. I have reported from the Kashmiri line of control from the Pakistani side. I have seen and I've met families who live in perpetual terror, in perpetual fear of crossfire. And so many lives have been lost, so many lives shattered, divided. And what baffles me is the world doesn't care. I mean, we are sitting in Berlin, we are discussing it. Kristen is from a reputable think tank. I want to know how come nobody's bothered about this, and will it have to be brought to a brink of a nuclear war for people to sit up and say, "Oh, we got to take care of this"?
It is remarkable. Why is the international community looking the other way?
The international community is looking the other way probably because they say it's a bilateral issue. This is the problem that the United Nations resolutions from the 1940s and 50s have lost their importance out of various reasons. The most obvious one is that since the 50s, China is also part of this problem. Second point would be that within Kashmir, at least on the Indian side, there has also been a strong independence movement by the Kashmiris. Now, the independence movement is not covered by the UN resolutions. So it would be difficult, besides some other technical issues, to make some form of a referendum when probably the most important movement, and this is normally an independence movement, which we know it from other parts of the world, is not represented. So in that sense, one can understand the position of the international community, and this has also been by very close allies of Pakistan. Even China has always argued, please, you have a problem with India, yes, but solve it on a bilateral level. We have seen these bilateral negotiations. The most important one was probably in 2007 when a solution was there, yes. So this is why the international community says, you have a problem, you solve it on bilateral dialogue. At the moment, the Indian government is not willing to go into any negotiations with India and with Pakistan, and I do not see it coming up soon.
OK, let's just break off for a second there. And the two figures at the centre of this ongoing crisis are the heads of government in Pakistan and India, two politicians who could hardly be more different.
India will fight as one. India will win as one.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi, India's fervent Hindu nationalist. He's revoked Articles 370 and 35A, which guaranteed Kashmir special status and autonomy from India's constitution. Modi thinks this will bring him a step closer to his goal of establishing India as the second major power in Asia, alongside China.
Article 370 and 35A gave Jammu and Kashmir nothing but terrorism, separatism, dynasticism and corruption.
Across the border, Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan, a former cricketer and playboy who's been married 3 times. Once a fixture of London's high society, he became a devout Muslim and politician later in life. He now espouses conservative, even extremist views.
It can't be possible that they attack us and we don't respond. What will happen next? Things will escalate. When both of us keep reacting, it could lead to war.
Modi or Khan? Who's got the upper hand in the Kashmir conflict?
Well, that's certainly one interesting question. The other question that I have is for Christian. If you had the ear of either of the two, or both of the two leaders, ideally, in the same room at one time, what advice would you give them now on where you want them to push this crisis?
I think the easiest solution and the best solution would be to settle on the status quo. And this is still not ruled out. One can imagine, like in 2007.
But you were just explaining yourself that there is fatigue with the status quo.
No, there is no. This is a debate on the Indian side. That's a debate on the Indian side. But between India and Pakistan, one can still agree on a solution like having the LOC as a soft border. This is not new. It depends on the political will on both sides. As I said, at the moment, I do not see the Indians willing to negotiate with Pakistan. But at the end, it has not changed the overall setting for a solution within the existing territorial delimitations and the status quo.
OK. Isha, your advice, your wisdom for the two leaders?
I think the best way, I agree to him, and I think the best way would be bilateral talks, and one has to solve it like that. But coming back to what Shahzeb was saying, I don't think that we are at the brink of nuclear war. I think both of these populist leaders, Narendra Modi and Imran Khan, none of them is so naive that they would get into a nuclear war. As far as their statements are concerned, the way Imran Khan has reacted, and then the way Modi has said that there would be a new chief, a CDS, who's going to look after the defense, the army, navy, and air force. I think these statements you have to make, because if you are populist leaders, you have to make sure that people are, listening to you, and they are again cheering whatever you're saying. And so I think my advice would be that they sit together, talk, and that's the only way out.
I don't think it's happening anytime soon. I mean, the way the Indian government is emboldened by lack of reaction from world community, Prime Minister Modi will push further on.
Where does that take him? Where does that take us if he pushes further on?
Well, the biggest worry is that you can unilaterally take an action in Kashmir without consulting the local population. The world sits there silently. Then you think you can get away with more. And who knows what else he has up his sleeves. The problem for Pakistan is its economy is in trouble. The government is becoming more and more authoritarian. So a lot of people are saying to the Pakistani government, you need to attend to problems at home. You've talked about Kashmir for 70 years. You failed to liberate it. And now, instead of resorting to funding jihadi elements in Kashmir, you need to clean up your own house. And so, I mean, I think it's bleak.
You're talking bleakly, you're talking darkly about where Mr. Modi might take this situation. I'm still curious to know what the worst-case scenario is.
Well, because Kashmir is a flashpoint, if things get out of hand, if there's another major attack in Kashmir, India will blame Pakistan and India will retaliate. And that is why I think the world needs to pay attention to it.
OK, and on that dark note, that's where we're going to have to leave it. We've been talking about the Kashmir crisis, new era or power grab. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. If we've given you some food for thought, do come back next week. Until then, bye-bye and tschüss.